Hi everyone, this is Miriam Mortel, author of the book Lessons in Law of Attraction. I decided to record this today just because of everything I keep hearing of what's going on in the news, and I know it's been scaring a lot of people, seeing what's happening especially at various universities like Columbia and Yale and Penn, etc. And I'm sure we've also had many people in our lives, whether it's coworkers, former friends, acquaintances, neighbors, who we realize have drank in the Kool-Aid and had some concern about what we're seeing with them. So with all that in mind, I wanted to share something different than a lot of the typical things that's going around. Well, yes, it's important to speak up against hate. It's important to be diligent. It's important to protect ourselves. It's important to take whatever legal action necessary. It's important to, as best we can, spread the word, right? And inform people about what's going on and educate people. But one of the biggest things we need to do, and something that I feel maybe, I can only say maybe, no one can say for sure, one of the reasons why the world is the way that it is so Hashem, God, can teach us what we can do solely within ourselves, unrelated to anyone else in the world. So obviously, at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, what is it? Or some of you may have thought, okay, pray. And yes, prayer is a great option. But I wanted to help you expand your mind on what is considered prayer. First of all, I believe any prayer, however it's said, is going to help. Do I think that there are other more effective ways to pray than others? Yes. And that's what I'm about to share with you. So about, I'm trying to remember, it was like 2.5, 3 years ago, I was listening to, it was a lecture by Rabbi David Aaron. And he was talking about how Jews don't pray, because praying is begging. This video of his that I found on YouTube changed my life. Why? Because guess how I was praying? I was begging. All of my prayers were, please God, and then fill in the blank. And I'm not saying that didn't ever get me where I wanted to be. But I will say it only got so far. It only got me so far, right? And he said the word Lahit Hallel really gets misinterpreted when people say it's to pray, because it literally means to imagine. Suddenly, it was like everything I learned from the Jewish perspective melded, oh, that's the right word, but it just connected with what I've learned from secular spirituality. Okay. And those who know me, who have listened to my other videos, I've always had interest in various types of spirituality. I always just found it interesting. Everything from, being really into gemstones when I was a teenager. I mean, I still think they're cool, but very much so when I was a teenager, and understanding that there's inherent healing properties, that the way God made those stones, they have certain frequencies, whatever, that can help with certain things. And I compared that similar to, vegetables have certain nutrients that can help you. Well, guess what? There's a lot of other things in the world that can help you too, gemstones being one of them. But I always had a lot of interest in various types of things in the secular spiritual community. Obviously, I only engaged in things that were kosher practices. But when I was going through a tough time in my life, and I would cry, and I would literally be in synagogue soaking the floor with my tears, like literal puddles of tears on the floor, and that is not an exaggeration. And anyone who's gone to synagogue with me has, they've seen when I've cried that was how hard I've cried, and I didn't care about crying in public. If I had to cry, I let myself cry, because I was there to cry before God, and I wasn't there to think about what anyone else thinks. But when I was going through such troubles in my life, and I even started saying the prayer of gratitude, Nishmat Kol Chai, which I talk about in my book, what happened was I kept being redirected to this idea that our thoughts create. And I've talked about this many times, but it's really important in case this video gets to someone who isn't familiar with my backstory or what I'm talking about, just so the next things that I'm going to say with regard to what's going on in the world makes sense. So when I was going through troubles in my life, okay, I had my mezuzah checked. So for anyone who's not Jewish, we have scrolls of our Shema prayer in our doorposts. And that's something that we do for protection. That prayer talks about how God is one, right? And sometimes if the scroll gets messed up, like if there's ink that gets, say if it's humid and something gets messed up with the ink, it wears, whatever it is, people say, okay, you want to make sure that, it's fully intact and together. But sometimes if people are going through some tough things, it's customary to have that checked. So I did that. I went to people to have curses removed. I did all kinds of crazy things, like, so like removing like Ayin Hara's evil eye. Okay. I prayed I did all of these things. And what I didn't know was a big reason why I was going through my life was because I didn't know at the time my thoughts create. And so when I was saying Nishmat Kol Chai, God was leading me, and even just from praying and crying my heart out, God was leading me to all these different resources saying the same thing. Like, hey, your thoughts create. So first I had a bunch of people telling me about Louise Hay. And Louise Hay was like my intro to this stuff. She also talks a lot about self-love. And if anyone hasn't checked out her books, I would recommend it. She happened to be, a Christian woman who I believe, specifically it's like the Church of Religious Science or something like that. So not a mainstream sect of Christianity, but the stuff that she teaches is very universal and open to people of all different religions. And most of the people who were telling me to go check her out were Jewish. They had found her great source on, self-love, understanding your thoughts create. And she only gets into it a little bit. Then I learned more and more as what we commonly know of law of attraction. But when most people learn about law of attraction, you're like, okay, I have some influence on the world. What really happens, from what I've learned and then myself tested, and I don't know the specific Jewish source for this, maybe someone could help me find that, but when I started learning the teachings of Neville Goddard was a Christian motivational speaker who basically was taught by an Ethiopian rabbi who basically taught him some basics about Kabbalah, okay? And I believe, even though it came through someone who's Christian, there's a lot of Jewish people who needed to know about our own stuff. And of course, my videos are people of all faiths. But right now I'm talking about protecting the Jewish community, protecting the Jewish community with what's going on in the world. So that's why I'm just, speaking the terminologies that I am in this particular video/audio. So, Neville Goddard talks about everyone is you pushed out, how the world is a reflection. And all the people who went to law of attraction talks about how the world's a mirror. But when you start to understand how literal that is, that the entire world as we know it, everything we see in the 3D, is a projection of what's in our minds, you understand that we're doing more than just influencing it. We're actually directing it. We are made in the image of God, which means we ourselves are also creators And when God created the world, he gave us all these infinite possibilities that we can choose from. Okay? Anyone who's ever heard about quantum physics understands the idea of these quantum realities. There's all these possibilities that when you observe them become a reality, positive or negative. What you put your focus on is what you literally breathe life into. So everything we think about ourselves, the way the world works, what we think about others in our life, the way we think about God, how God shows up in the world, we're always going to get a reflection of our beliefs. And it's pretty literal. And when we see things that are really scary, if we can look at it and just say, hey, this came from a thought in my head, it's suddenly not so scary anymore. The scary part becomes realizing, oh man, I have more power than I thought I did. It's kind of like you'd watch, they'd always have these various shows where like someone turned out to have magical powers, right? And someone's always like, you must use your powers for good. But there's a certain point where like they find out they have this responsibility, and it's kind of scary and cool at the same time. Well, it turns out when those TV shows were created, God stuck some truth in there. Because when people talk about the idea of Mashiach, the Messiah coming, we always think about it as an external person coming and saving us. And I'm not saying that there isn't a person. But even if there's a physical person who is helping to redeem us, save us, etc., the manifestation of Mashiach, of the Messiah, I believe still comes from within us. That there's something in our consciousness that needs to change. We're told that the reason our holy temple was destroyed thousands of years ago was due to baseless hatred. When you understand truly that not only that your thoughts create in the sense of having some influence, but that we really are the creators of our reality. And I want to, by the way, just put an asterisk to that, because obviously there's a lot of people who do horrible things. And I'm not trying to insinuate that if someone has gone through something horrendous that they should blame themselves and not hold the other person accountable or whatever it is, because sometimes our souls decided, for whatever its reason and forever the collective mission world, whatever it is, we're supposed to go through certain things, and our soul manifested that basically for us. So it still came through us. Like, it's not like, so obviously please take what I'm saying responsibly, but also understand that no matter what happens to you in life, you also have the power to change it. And so when you truly understand that everyone is you pushed out, that everything that you hold in your mind gets printed out like a 3D printer. I heard that on a YouTube video. I was like, that's the best analogy that I've heard. We have to keep in mind, whatever we hold within ourselves, wherever we're mentally dwelling, is what we're going to experience. I did a video back in the summer on the phrase, Mishaneh Makol, Mishaneh Mazal. Change your place, change your luck. It had dawned on me, it's like I had this download that I understood it was about where you're mentally dwelling, not where you're physically dwelling. I'm not saying you wouldn't also change your mazel if you change your physical dwelling, but chances are, if you change your physical dwelling, you also change your mentality in some way. There's usually something that goes on cognitively as well when you're in a new space. But for sure, when you're in a new headspace, you experience a different result. You may have seen the term online, quantum leaping, quantum jumping. All that means, because really all that is fancy talk for changing your perception. Because what manifests specifically are the stories you hold within, your perceptions of life, your perception of who do you think you are. Okay? God is the ultimate I am. But every time we say those words, I am, we have to be really careful what follows it. Are we saying that we're wealthy, healthy, loved, or are we saying the opposite? Every way we identify and every story we have about people in our lives, also, it's teaching us how we truly view ourselves. It's the only way that us, which are aspects of God in human form, can truly get to know ourselves, is through this universal mirror. And when you look at the stories we say about other people, so I'll give an example, and then I'm going to get back to this as a whole, a global scale, what's going on. When you look at just daily life, I'll give an example. Let's say I was expecting a package from Amazon, because I've done this many times. I've expected it, let's say, to come not in perfect condition. Let's say I bought a birthday card for someone, it came bent. Okay? Or I order a box of something, the box came crushed, whatever it is. I made an assumption that Amazon would mess up. If that assumption is consistent, because just one thought alone may or may not manifest it, but if it is consistent with the character of who I think I am and the character of who I think, Amazon as a company is, I will get that as a manifestation. But really, the story it says about me could be something like, I'm often inconvenienced, I don't get what I want, I always have to, call customer service and be inconvenienced. Like, in some way, shape, or form, the fact that I would make an assumption that my package wouldn't be delivered properly is an assumption about how I think my life goes and who I think I am as a person. And this is true for everything in life. So certainly the things we say about others, okay? Someone could think their husband is super unhelpful and they're always telling the story, I always have to do everything myself, right? And when we talk about the idea of baseless hatred, when we talk about this idea of that being what destroyed the temple, and you understand who we're creating, you understand why being loving and not fake positive, like, I don't like when people are like, I'm just going to be positive about it, or I'm just going to think nicely of this person, but I really think they're a jerk. That's not working. It only works if you truly change your perception, and usually to the point of feeling an emotion. You don't have to always feel an emotion, but if you want it to for sure be successful, you change your perception of that person yourself. And if something's not lining up with that, like, in other words, if what you're experiencing in life isn't lining up with that, it means there's something else still to change. And you look at the 3Ds in the mirror like, okay, well, maybe I changed my story about whatever person I'm dealing with, but not the things that happen to me. So it's important to change both yourself and your person, or yourself and the business, or yourself and, whatever group of people. And this is no different than it being, just dealing with this on a global scale. One of the things that have been on my mind well before October 7th is what would have happened if during the Holocaust and before the Holocaust, it was known that our thoughts could create. And I'm sure there must have been some reason, I would hope, some good reason why that mystic stuff was kept separate or concealed, because obviously you want to be careful whose hands it gets into, but now at this point it's all over the internet. And because I thought, couldn't this have saved so many lives? I also believe things happen for a reason. I mean, obviously, even when anyone, individually or collectively goes through something, sometimes those dark times, those hard times lead to something good. And it is a necessary part of our life. It's part of that what's known as a bridge of incidents to get us where we need to be, even if sometimes that bridge is something horrible. I mean, horrible doesn't begin to describe the Holocaust, and no one can say why that happened. But I'd often wondered, how would life have been different if people knew that they could just go inward that they could imagine, that they could pray, not just in their words, not just beg, but imagine, see themselves differently, see the world differently. Could things have been different? I saw a YouTube video probably a couple of years ago now. It was on the Torah codes, and it was by, I believe it was from Greg Braden. And Greg Braden, well known in like the I'll say spiritual / scientific community. There's a bunch of people who straddle where those lines meet and whatever. And obviously, I don't know, I can't say that video I watched everything was credible or not. I don't know enough to speak intelligently on the subject matter of Torah codes. But one of the things in the video, he was saying that after every event that we afterwards were able to look back on the Torah and see all these negative events, there was always basically a code that said, will you change this? And that stuck out to me because we always have the power to change things. And I feel it's time we got stubborn. Stubborn in a good way this time. To really say the inner story that we want to say. Because if we really create our reality, we create our next moments. The thoughts we choose now are imperative. And it's not that we live in La La Land. It's not that we say, oh yeah, everything's fine and rosy. But we say the story from here on in, how we want it to go. So we say the story that, I mean, honestly, whatever feels right. You can feel in your heart, Mashiach is here, that Messiah is here. You can say, you know what? Suddenly now there's world peace, and speak it into existence. It doesn't matter what happened before. And again, that doesn't mean that you walk around ignorant to what's happened in life. It means you're consciously creating your next moment, and there is a difference. It means focusing your attention on our allies rather than people who are not. It means whatever you put your intention on, you're going to get more of, so choose carefully. Every story we say has that ability to come to fruition. So we could either tell the story of our safety, of things getting better, and focus on the good parts and grow that, or God forbid, the opposite. And so we're at a really critical moment now where, again, we're not trying to brush anything under the rug. We're not trying to dare say that we don't, have enemies, whatever it is. You can acknowledge it and you say, okay, I created that. We as a collective created that. Okay? Because collectively, we've always had a story that's said in every generation. Okay? Even though we always end up being okay, we always end up winning, we always end up staying alive, thank God. This time, this Passover, let's go for a much bigger redemption. A much bigger sense of freedom. This probably seems ridiculous. Because they're probably saying, oh, what thoughts do we have? How could we, affect change like that? And I'm going to share a story with you. One that I'm a little apprehensive to put online, but I feel like it's really crucial for me to share. When I think she was like 9 or 10-year-old hostage, Emily, it was said that she was dead. And this came from, I believe, the IDF, who had said that she was dead. And her father put out a video saying that he was relieved that his daughter was dead versus something, God forbid, worse. I mean, yes, you could maybe say it was intuition, but there was a part of me that after feeling so heartbroken and grieving so much after October 7th, I just said, and I stuck to it, and I said, she is alive. And I kept affirming that she was alive. And I kept in my mind and in my heart only accepting that she was alive. And I'm trying to remember if it was within a week or 2 weeks, whatever, some really relatively short amount of time, she was found alive and she was brought home. I could have just accepted what I saw. I saw, all these things on Instagram that said horrible news. Our thoughts also can change the past, at least to a certain extent, and I'm not obviously I don't know the extent of it, but God transcends time. So therefore our thoughts and because we're part of God, whatever, to some extent we can transcend time as well. And again, that's not something that I can really expound upon so much. But I believe when God created the world and every happening, in other words, everything that happens in the world, every point of time on each timeline, how everything connects, it's just whatever, it's all connected like a web. It somehow all works. I don't understand the logistics of it, but I've seen it. And the question's really, where do we go from here? The world is the way that it is. Again, I'm not saying not to protect yourself, but I'm saying every day we have the choice to put our focus on what we want or what we don't want. In the Torah, there's a line that says, basically, we have a choice between choosing life or choosing death. I believe it's somewhere in Devarim. This is, to me, what I understand this to mean, and Neville Goddard, actually, I believe I put something similar to that into one of his books. But when we choose the story that we want, that's us choosing life. And it's not like we're just thinking, whatever it is. Like, again, it's not just I'm thinking positive. It's not like I'm going throughout my day and I'm like, I'm in la la land. I'm setting this intention. I'm being intentional about my thoughts. I know my thoughts are creating my next moment. I'm choosing to change my perception that even if a moment ago there was hatred on college campuses, there was all kinds of threats, whatever it is, as a part of God, I'm powerful. And as a part of God, I'm flipping the script. And as a part of God, I'm affirming that I'm safe. There's all kinds of things you can do. Everything from, so I'll tell you what I did before Iran had attacked Israel, when we knew the attack was going to come. I thought about the 4-letter name of God, and I mentally pictured like a dome of God's light emanating from that name, covering, Israel and just our people. And I think the more people we have doing that, the better, because again, it's not that you have to live in La La Land, but it's understanding that we do have power. I also was affirming for a couple days before Iran attacked how they have terrible aim, how they miss, constantly affirming that. And there was, afterwards, it came out, there was a number of rockets that, exactly that, misfired, didn't get where they were supposed to go, rockets, missiles, whatever they were. So, and I'm not saying that was just for me, I'm not trying to claim that. I think it's everything. I think when we say Tehillims, when we say Psalms, when we pray in our own words, when we pray in Hebrew, anything that we do, I think it all contributes. That was just me saying what I'm doing my part, and I think collectively that was the manifestation of all of our prayers. My point in all of this is that prayer can be so many different things. To me, a prayer is an intention of some kind. It's an intention that we're looking to our higher power to transfer what is to whatever we hold within our hearts. Okay? So from being unsafe to being safe, sick to healed, whatever it is. But the key is not when we pray, whether it's, please God such and such, even if it feels like it's a begging prayer, again, that's better than nothing. Even if it's something like that, whether it's a visualization, whether it's an affirmation, whether it's saying Psalms, we should have in mind what we want and not what we don't want. We shouldn't focus on the problem, we should focus on the solution, because, again, whatever we put our attention on is what's going to grow. So You can affirm our enemies surrendering, or that they have already surrendered. You can affirm all of the hostages were found safe and alive, or at least relatively speaking safe, and they're home. They're home. They're okay. We get to create our next moments. We don't have to just say, oh, it's the end of times and things are going to be terrible. That does not have to be our truth. And I'm urging everyone to step into their power and realize we're more powerful than we're ever taught. If you want to test this out and try it on something small, just to see how this works. If you go to the supermarket and your cashier's having a bad day, or so you perceived moments ago, and she was just, let's say, getting a little bit rowdy or upset in exchange with someone before you in the supermarket line. Visualize her and say, I'm sure she really had just a rough day. She's a sweet person. Start telling the story that you want. Watch that cashier be nice to you. It works. But it's the same thing on a global scale. And the more people who do this, the greater the impact it will have. So that means things like affirming and staying in our new truth. All these universities are doing the right thing. They're on the right side of history. They're standing up for the Jewish community. Okay? You're saying our president, so I'm certainly speaking to people in the U.S. now, okay? Regardless of where we are politically, and I personally happen to be independent, so I'm not a fan of either team, so to speak. But it's about affirming the story that we want. That Biden stands with Israel, that Biden protects Israel. And as tempting as it is, because I know I messed up with this one too, not looking at Biden like the wishy-washy person he was, and you say now, because God will cause, because the thing is, God is always our partner in this. God is the force, the energy that puts into place all the things that we have prayed for. So the how is not up to us. All kinds of weird things can happen. It doesn't have to be logical. That's what we see consistently throughout the Torah, throughout the Bible. We see a bunch of things that kind of logically didn't make sense, but happened. Because God finds a way for it to make it happen, not us. We're the what, God's the how. So we say things like, our president. So if you're in the U.S., or if you could say from outside the U.S. too, but just say U.S. president, okay, Biden. He stands with Israel now. He's making sure we have the protection that we need. He stands by us. He's firm. It doesn't matter what happened 2 seconds ago, because what's going to happen is that anything that we affirm, anything we put out into the universe is actually going to go right to his subconscious. And to the subconscious of really the entire collective, meaning everyone on Earth. So every person that needs to be a player in this role, in other words, whoever would play a part in making this happen, is going to suddenly get influenced to help. So whoever is needed to help change his mind or get certain things done or whatever it is. And the coolest part, when you affirm something about somebody else, they think it's their idea. They think it's their idea. Because it goes from your conscious mind to their subconscious mind. So they just get a thought, they get an impulse. They start thinking about things differently. So it works, again, individually and collectively. If there were someone that was mean to you, you can mentally, you have to truly see them differently. But you can start affirming, they're the nicest person, they love me so much, and they're going to start having loving thoughts about you. And they don't know that it's coming from you. So, isn't that a wonderful idea? to use on our enemies. You don't have to do that. I'm not going to jive with everybody. That's why I prefer to say things like they surrendered, like meaning our enemies surrendered. They have bad aim. They're no longer in power. I just start saying the story that I want. But the key is being consistent and saying more of the new story than the old story. And that's a challenge for most people. Why? Because it's comfortable to stay in the familiar. It's comfortable for us to, I hate to say it, stay, whether it's individually or collectively, to some extent in victimhood. Because it's so easy to say, oh, look what they're doing, let's look what they did, because we feel like we need that sympathy, we need that for our safety. But when we understand that safety comes from our thoughts, our inner power, okay? And that we have the power to change anything, you really understand that there are no enemies. Everything is nothing but a shadow, okay? For anyone who's heard the phrase, God is your shadow. Well, God is everything. So guess what? Everything is your shadow. Everything is coming from all of us. So it doesn't matter whether it's an individual problem or, something on a collective scale. Or it's this idea of bringing Mashiach, who I affirm is already here. Because that's what I want to experience. And so the more I affirm that, the more I choose to see evidence of that, I get to create my reality. So I'm choosing to say, I'm not waiting for something outside of myself to happen to make me feel safe or good or whatever it is. I'm stepping into my power, and I'm urging you all to do the same. And I understand that it's not easy to change how you've been thinking, whatever it is. So take one little piece at a time. And honestly, don't dare try to do it any other way. It's like, otherwise it's trying to jump up a staircase. You don't always have to be in the perfect vibration. You don't always have to be happy. What you have to be is consistent and persistent in telling your new story and choosing who you think you are. So we step out of victimhood, out of slavery, and into our freedom and our empowerment. We're saying we're the nation that God has protected, given us His love, His commandments, and we're using the power that He bestowed upon humanity to change the game in our favor. So if you're Jewish and you're going to Seder and you're telling the story of the Exodus, think about what reality you want to exit and which one you want to enter. Think about what it really feels like to be free from fear, and take that time to visualize, whether it's when you light candles or at the table, for women who light candles at the beginning of the holiday, or at the table, to visualize the story that we want. Visualize the Hashgacha's home. Visualize us being in Jerusalem, with Mashiach, with the Messiah. That is our power. That is our right. And let that be our prayer. So next year, we don't have to say those words, next year in Jerusalem. We'll just be there. Have a good holiday.